Before we get into Bob Huggins, let me address something real quick. I had several of you guys email me last night, sending me a link to the Young Turks Sports channel here on YouTube. Now, in case you're not familiar, the Young Turks, I would consider them to be a mainstream media outlet. They have a channel dedicated to sports here on YouTube. It's hosted by some dude whose last experience having contact with an actual woman was when his mother gave birth to him. Apparently, he was outraged. He was triggered by my commentary on Glenn Kuiper. He could not believe that I could defend Glenn Kuiper. He used a clip from my channel along with a clip from Black and White Sports, calling us conservative media, pretending like he could not believe we would have the audacity to defend Glenn Kuiper. I know some of you guys want my thoughts on it, want my reaction to it. To be honest with you, I don't have one. Seriously. This dude's video, his reaction was so bland, so boring, he gave me nothing to respond to. His video was about 5 minutes. I could barely make it through the video, and it was about me. It is 5 minutes of some nerd condescendingly preaching to the identifiers who watch him about conservative media defending someone that we're accusing of mythical racism. It's not the first time this has happened, probably won't be the last. I'm not mad about it. I could not care less about what some Sunday school teacher at Woke United Methodist thinks about me. I do appreciate you guys giving me the heads up, though. I appreciate you guys looking out. Now, let's get into Bob Huggins. I always say this is not an agenda-driven channel. I come on here every day and give you my perspective of what's happening. I am not aligned with conservative media. I'm damn sure not aligned with the woke media. There are very, very few instances where I find myself somewhat agreeing with deacons at Woke United Methodist. It is extremely rare that I feel outrage is justified. Notice I did not call it fake outrage like I usually do. Even though I think some of this outrage with Bob Huggins is exaggerated, I feel like most of the outrage is legitimate here. There's a huge difference. There is a huge difference between being caught on a hot mic saying something and knowing you're live on the air and saying it not once, but twice. There's a huge difference between an accidental slip-up like what happened with Glenn Kuiper and what happened yesterday on local radio in Cincinnati with Bob Huggins. I don't like censoring speech. In most instances, I don't like to see people being fired or canceled over words. Reason being, most of the time, the deacons are trying to cancel people for no reason. They tried to cancel Dave Chappelle because he was making jokes about Tran Dan. Jokes about transgender people are a direct violation of the woke commandments. They have been trying to silence Tucker Carlson for years. They use the power of social media to incite fake outrage. They organize a group of useless basement dwellers to flood social media with fake outrage from sensitive men, and in some cases, women who want to be men. They put pressure on major media companies to silence anyone who doesn't agree with them, and it works. But that is not the case here with Bob Huggins. This isn't one of those situations where members of Woke United Methodists are overreacting. There are certain things you just can't say, especially live on the radio. Bob Huggins not only said it once, he said it twice. There's no way to explain this away. There's no excuse. There is no way to justify this. I find it hard to believe someone who spends more time around college kids than he probably spends with his own family. I find it hard to believe that Bob Huggins can be this out of touch. Yesterday, he was the guest on some dump radio station in Cincinnati. I didn't know people still listened to AM and FM radio, but there was at least one person listening yesterday, and they posted the clip on social media. Bob Huggins coached in Cincinnati for 16 years. He spent the last 16 years coaching at West Virginia. They were talking about the rivalry between Xavier and Cincinnati. They call it the Crosstown Shootout. This rivalry is absolutely meaningless on a national level. Until this morning, I didn't even know it was an actual thing. The most interesting part about this rivalry, students from Xavier throw what Bob Huggins calls plastic penises on the court. I believe the proper term is dildo, or if you're a worshiper of the oak tree, the shitfucks like to call these magical battery-powered devices the cucumber. Bob Huggins, he was describing the rivalry. The conversation was lighthearted until he dove head first directly into the shallow end. Now, I'm going to edit the slurs here for obvious reasons, but you will know exactly what he says. It's a 3-letter word that rhymes with bag. Listen for yourself.
I tell you what, any school that can throw rubber penises on the floor and then say they didn't do it, my God, they can get away with anything.
Rubber penis. Was this
I think that was at the crosstown shootout, wasn't it?
I think it was transgender night, wasn't it?
What?
Was that it?
It was a crosstown shootout. Yeah, no, what it was all those Catholic I think.
All right.
They were envious they didn't have one.
Well, Steve, your comments about Bob Huggins. Is he the best?
He's the best.
The best ever. Is he the best assistant coach you ever had?
Who?
Steve Moeller.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, there's just no defending the indefensible. There's just no way to excuse it. Bob Huggins, he immediately issued a public apology. Does not matter. Now, he didn't try to make excuses. He didn't try to justify his actions. I'm 69 years old. I thought that word was acceptable. In my 40 years of coaching, I've heard that word used thousands of times. I just don't understand. When did this become a violation? When I was in high school in the early 2000s, this word was thrown around all the time. If you go back and listen to music from that time period, comedy shows, movies, TV, it was common. It was normal. Even though it's always been considered a homophobic slur, back then, it was more commonly used as a way of janking someone, kind of like the old yo mama jokes. But times change, and it's not like times changed recently. It's not like this became unacceptable in the last 3 years as chapters of Woke United Methodist have spread into every major city across America. This has been considered unacceptable for a long, long time. I am not going to be surprised if we see former players come out publicly and say they have heard Bob Huggins say this before. I defend Glenn Kuiper when the shitfucks were trying to claim he slipped up and said the N-word because it's part of his daily vocabulary. That claim was bullshit. With Bob Huggins, I would believe it. This was no slip of the tongue. This is probably something Bob Huggins says with regularity. Does it mean he's homophobic? I'm not trying to excuse what he said, but I would imagine there are some other older men who don't see the problem with it. Like I said, for most of their life, it hasn't been considered a problem. The problem for Bob Huggins, it is now. I have never been an advocate for firing people over speech. In the vast majority of cases, I think companies should stand behind their employees when the deacons are pressuring them to let them go because Victor Virgin was deeply offended by something they said. But the University of West Virginia, they don't have a choice here. As of the time of this recording, about 11 o'clock on Tuesday morning, they have not fired Bob Huggins yet. Right now, they are conducting an extensive investigation. No investigation needs to be conducted. West Virginia does not have a choice. You have got to fire Bob Huggins. There's absolutely no way you can keep him on staff. That's not the hill you want to die on. If West Virginia decides to keep Bob Huggins, there is no doubt about it. There will be protests on campus. The entire focus of the mainstream media will be on Morgantown, West Virginia. Going to spill over into the classroom, into other sports programs. It's just not worth it. If this were a situation where this was nothing but fake outrage, if this was a case where Bob Huggins didn't say anything wrong and they were creating the outrage to fit their narrative and have someone silenced, West Virginia has to stand by him. But that is not the case here. Bob Huggins should know better, not only because it's common knowledge that this is not acceptable in public discourse, but Bob Huggins is close friends with Tom Brenneman, the same Tom Brenneman that was caught on a hot mic using the same slur and fired over it. Couple of months after that happened in the summer of 2020, Bob Huggins invited Tom Brenneman to speak to his team about accountability, about taking responsibility for your actions. Bob Huggins had a front row seat to what happens when you put yourself in this situation. And Bob Huggins did it anyway. Now, here is where I disagree with the woke media. Leave it to Mike Freeman at USA Today to write something I don't agree with. In case you're not a regular viewer of mine, Mikey Freeman, he is one of our favorites here on the channel. The Star Trek virgin took time out of his busy schedule to address what happened with Bob Huggins. This gave R2-D2 a much-needed break from playing the butt bongo, so he had time to recharge his batteries. Well, KC, I thought you said Mike Freeman was the Star Trek virgin. He is. Mike is relegated to watching C-3PO and R2-D2. They refuse to allow him to participate in the band. I found a couple of things interesting about Mike Freeman's response to Bob Huggins. Now, one of these points applies to the response from most of the mainstream media. If you wanted to look at this through the lens of being offended, Bob Huggins' comments could be construed as being offensive to the Catholic faith. Xavier is a Catholic school. Bob Huggins used the slur while referring to them as Catholics. As you guys know, the mainstream media, they don't need ammunition to be offended. In this case, Bob Huggins handed it directly to him. But I have yet to see one member of the media call out Bob Huggins for possibly offending Catholics. They're all offended by his slur against the LGBT, but not one of them has mentioned the Catholic part of the equation. I wonder why. I wonder if it has anything to do with Catholics choosing to worship Jesus instead of the oak tree. Jesus is public enemy number one in the halls of Woke United Methodist. The second point, Mike Freeman said, those two radio hosts in Cincinnati should be fired. They are buffoons. Why? Why should they be fired? Because in a moment of awkwardness, in a moment where they were probably surprised by what Bob Huggins said, they said Bob Huggins was the best? They should be fired over that? This is one of the many problems in the woke media. There is no grace given. There is no understanding. They don't have the ability to put themselves in that situation. Those two guys in Cincinnati, they shouldn't lose their jobs over this. No one's going to feel bad for Bob Huggins. He fucked up. He should be fired. He's going to be fined financially, but those guys on local dump radio in Cincinnati, they're probably making what, 40, 50 grand a year? I would imagine they need their job. They should not be fired over their response during an awkward situation on live radio. But give me your thoughts. Bob Huggins' coaching career is over. At 69 years old, highly unlikely he can recover from this. Do you think he deserves to be fired? Do you think West Virginia has a choice here? You let me know. Sound off in the comments below. Make sure to like and subscribe. Click the notification bell to receive all notifications from the channel. Best way to contact me is by email at btlkc84@gmail.com, KC_BTL84 on Twitter. I'll see you guys later.